The cold steel of my front door key felt like an icicle against my palm, but the fire in my heart was warmer than it had been in 3 years. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be 3,000 miles away in a high-security research facility, but I had finished the project early just to surprise the woman who held my soul in her hands. As I turned the lock, I imagined her scream of joy, the smell of her perfume, and the way her eyes would light up when she saw the diamond necklace hidden in my pocket. I had no idea that in exactly 60 seconds, the man I was, the kind, providing, trusting husband, would die, and a ghost would take his place. Before we dive into this journey of shadows and shattered glass, I want to take a moment to welcome you all back to Stone Tales. We believe every story deserves to be heard, and I'd love to know where in the world you are joining us from today. Drop your city or country in the comments below. It truly helps us feel like a global family. And if you believe that justice should always find its way home, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join our community. Your support is the heartbeat of this channel. Now, let's go back to that hallway. My name is Elias Thorne. To the world, I am a successful structural engineer, a man who builds things to last. To my wife, Sarah, I was the rock. We had been married for 7 years, a decade of our lives entwined since the day we met in a rain-slicked library in college. Sarah was everything I wasn't, vibrant, social, and effortlessly beautiful. She was the light to my often brooding academic darkness. Beside us always was Marcus. Marcus wasn't just my best friend. He was the brother I never had. We played pee-wee football together, shared a dorm room, and he was the best man at my wedding. When my father passed away, Marcus held the casket. When Sarah and I bought this house, this beautiful, sprawling Victorian we spent 3 years renovating, Marcus was the one who helped me tile the kitchen floor. He had his own key. He was family, or so I thought. The house was eerily quiet as I stepped into the foyer. It was 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. The sunlight filtered through the stained glass of the front door, casting long, bloody red streaks across the hardwood. I kicked off my shoes, moving with the practiced silence of a man trying to preserve a surprise. I noticed a pair of expensive leather loafers by the door, the kind Marcus wore. Good, I thought, a foolish smile spreading across my face. Marcus is here. We can all go out for a celebratory dinner. I crept up the stairs, my heart thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. I could hear muffled voices coming from the master suite. At first, I thought they were watching a movie. Then I heard a laugh. It wasn't the polite social laugh Sarah used at parties. It was a deep, intimate sound that I recognized from the earliest, most private days of our honeymoon. My hand froze on the banister. The air in the hallway suddenly felt thin, as if the oxygen were being sucked out by an invisible vacuum. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself there was a logical explanation. But the lizard brain, the primal part of us that senses a predator before we see it, was screaming at me to run. I reached the bedroom door. It was cracked open just an inch. Through that tiny sliver of space, the world as I knew it disintegrated. I didn't see a movie. I didn't see a casual conversation. I saw my wife, The woman I had worked 18-hour days for to provide a life of luxury, wrapped in the arms of the man I called my brother. They were on our bed, the bed I had hand-carved from mahogany as a wedding gift. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was the way they spoke. "Do you think he'll suspect anything when he gets back Friday?" Sarah whispered, her voice tracing a line of fire down my spine. Marcus chuckled, that familiar, warm sound that now sounded like the hiss of a serpent. "Elias, the man is a genius with blueprints, Sarah, but he's blind when it comes to people. He thinks the world is built on straight lines and solid foundations. He has no idea how easy it is to make it all crumble." "I feel bad sometimes," Sarah said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "He tries so hard to please me." "Let him try," Marcus replied, pulling her closer. "While he's out building bridges, I'm the one crossing them. Besides, once the divorce papers are served, and the infidelity clause, you tucked into that. Prenup is triggered in reverse. We'll have the house, the savings, and his firm's shares. He won't just lose you, Sarah. He'll lose everything." I stood there, paralyzed. It wasn't just an affair. It was a demolition. They weren't just breaking my heart. They were orchestrating my professional and financial execution. I looked down at the diamond necklace in my hand. The gold chain felt like a noose. I wanted to kick the door in. I wanted to scream until my lungs bled. I wanted to drag Marcus out by his hair and show him what a man with nothing left to lose looks like. But as I watched them, a strange, icy calm settled over me. It was the clarity of a structural engineer looking at a building that was beyond repair. When a foundation is this rotten, you don't try to patch the cracks. You perform a controlled demolition. I backed away from the door, step by agonizing step. I didn't make a sound. I picked up my shoes, walked out the front door, and sat in my car 3 blocks away. I sat there for 4 hours, watching the house. I watched Marcus leave at 6 p.m. He walked with a swagger, whistling a tune I recognized. He looked like a man who owned the world. 10 minutes later, Sarah came to the window, framing herself in the light, looking like the picture of a loyal, waiting wife. I realized then that I didn't know these people. I had been living with a ghost and confiding in a shadow. Everything I had built, my marriage, my friendship, my home, was a lie. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer, a man who owed me a significant favor from a decade ago. "Arthur," I said, my voice sounding like grinding stones, "I need you to look into my prenuptial agreement, specifically the clauses regarding moral turpitude and asset distribution in the event of a collaborative fraud." "Elias, what's going on? You sound different." "I've just discovered a flaw in the structure, Arthur, a fatal one. I need to know how to tear it down without getting any dust on my suit." That night, I didn't go home. I stayed in a motel on the edge of town, staring at the ceiling. I didn't sleep. I spent the night mapping out every asset, every joint account, and every secret I knew about Marcus's struggling investment firm. See, Marcus had been losing money, a lot of it. I had been quietly bailing him out for a year, thinking he was just having a run of bad luck. Now I realized he was using my money to fund the lifestyle he was using to woo my wife. The next morning, I returned home at my scheduled time, Friday. I walked in the door, acting the part of the exhausted, loving husband. Sarah ran into my arms, her eyes wide with simulated joy. She kissed me, and for the first time in my life, her touch made my skin crawl. "I missed you so much," she lied, her voice honey-sweet. "I missed you too," I replied, the lie tasting like ash. "I have so much to tell you, and I have a surprise for Marcus, too. I've decided to invest that final $1 million into his new hedge fund. We should have him over for dinner tonight to celebrate." The sparkle in her eyes wasn't love. It was greed. She thought the trap was closing. She had no idea she was the one walking into the cage. Dinner was a master class in deception. Marcus arrived, dressed in a suit I had bought him for his birthday. He shook my hand with a firm, masculine grip that made me want to break every bone in his fingers. We sat around the mahogany table, the table I had sat at while planning my ruin, and drank expensive wine. "To friendship," Marcus said, raising his glass, "and to the foundations that never break." "To foundations," I echoed, looking him straight in the eye. "And to the things we build in the dark." As the night wore on, I watched them exchange secret glances. They thought they were so clever. They thought I was the boring husband who was too busy with math to understand passion or betrayal. They were so confident that they didn't notice I had left my phone recording on the sideboard, or that I had spent the afternoon installing high-definition cameras in the master bedroom under the guise of upgrading the security system. But I wasn't just looking for evidence of an affair. I needed something bigger. I needed the smoking gun that Marcus was embezzling from our joint business ventures. Something I had suspected but never wanted to believe. As dessert was served, I leaned back and smiled. "You know, Marcus, I was looking over the books for the harbor project. There's a discrepancy, about $400,000. It seems to have been funneled into a private offshore account registered to a shell company called S&M Acquisitions." The color drained from Marcus's face so fast it was almost comical. Sarah dropped her spoon. It hit the china with a sharp clack. "Elias, I can explain that," Marcus stammered, his best friend mask slipping. "That was a temporary move for tax purposes. I was going to tell you." "Don't worry about it," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "I'm sure there's a perfectly good reason. Just like I'm sure there's a perfectly good reason why your loafers were in my foyer on Tuesday afternoon when I came home early." The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a building finally collapsing. Sarah's breath hitched. Marcus's eyes darted toward the door. You were here Tuesday?" Sarah whispered. "I was," I said, leaning forward, "and I saw everything. I heard everything. The plan for the divorce, the plan for the firm, the infidelity clause." Marcus tried to stand up, his face hardening. "Look, Elias, it's not what it looks like. We can talk about this. We're friends. Friends don't sleep in my bed, Marcus, and friends certainly don't try to steal the very roof over my head." I pulled a thick envelope from my inner jacket pocket and tossed it onto the table. It slid across the wood, stopping right in front of Sarah. "What is this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "That," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "that is the beginning of your nightmare. But before you open it, there's something you both need to know. I didn't just come home early to catch you. I came home because I received an anonymous tip 2 weeks ago. Someone has been watching you both for a long time. Someone who hates you even more than I do right now." Just then, there was a heavy knock at the door. Not the sound of a guest, but the authoritative, rhythmic pounding of the police. Marcus looked at me, terror finally replacing his arrogance. "Elias, what did you do?" "I didn't do anything, Marcus. I just gave the authorities the passwords to the files you thought you deleted." "And Sarah, you might want to check the news. Your secret father, the one you told me died 10 years ago, is currently standing on our front porch with a detective." Sarah's face went white. My father? The one you spent 10 years hiding? Because he's a convicted fraudster who you helped hide stolen money for, I said. The money that is currently sitting in our joint account. The money the feds have been looking for since 2015. The door burst open. But it wasn't just the police who walked in. It was a man I had never seen before, a man who looked exactly like Sarah, but with eyes full of a decade's worth of cold, calculated revenge. He didn't look at the police. He looked at Sarah and smiled a jagged, broken smile. "Hello, daughter. Did you think I'd stay in that cell forever while you spent my retirement?" As the handcuffs clicked around Marcus's wrists and Sarah began to scream, I realized the twist I had prepared was only the tip of the iceberg. Because as the father approached me, he didn't treat me like a victim. He leaned in and whispered something that turned my blood to ice. "You did well, Elias, just like we planned. But you forgot one thing." I looked at the man, a stranger I had supposedly collaborated with, and realized I had no idea who he was. And then I looked at the floor. My shadow didn't match my movements. Wait, if I didn't call this man, who did? Part 1 ends here. The trap has been sprung. But it seems there's a master puppeteer pulling Elias's strings too. Who is the man claiming to be Sarah's father, and what plan is he referring to? The room was spinning. As the police began to lead Marcus and Sarah toward the door, the man who claimed to be Sarah's father gripped my shoulder with a strength that felt like a vice. His eyes weren't filled with the warmth of a reunited parent. They were cold, calculating, and predatory. "Who are you?" I whispered, my voice barely audible over Sarah's hysterical sobbing. The man leaned in, his breath smelling of expensive tobacco and old secrets. "I'm the man who built the firm you work for, Elias. I'm the man who put Sarah in that library 10 years ago to meet you. And I'm the man who just made sure Marcus's embezzlement was traced back to your personal digital signature." My heart stopped. The controlled demolition I thought I was directing wasn't mine. I wasn't the architect of this revenge. I was the foundation being blown up to clear the way for a much larger skyscraper. The flashing red and blue lights of the police cruisers danced against the mahogany walls of my home, making the scene look like a fever dream. Sarah was being read her rights, her face a mask of smeared mascara and pure, unadulterated terror. Marcus was silent, his arrogance replaced by the hollow stare of a man who realized he had been outplayed by someone far more dangerous than a boring husband. But as they were escorted out, the front door didn't close. 2 men in dark suits remained standing like gargoyles on either side of the entryway. The man, the one I'll call the ghost, sat down in my chair at the head of my table. He poured himself a glass of the wine I had bought to celebrate my return. "Sit down, Elias," he said. "It wasn't a request." "You're not her father," I said, my legs feeling like lead as I sank into the chair opposite him. "Biologically? No. Sarah was a foster kid with a talent for manipulation. I scouted her when she was 19. I needed someone inside. Thorn Engineering. Someone to ensure the contracts for the city's new infrastructure projects went to the right people. You were the rising star, the genius. She was the anchor. And Marcus? Marcus was the insurance policy in case you ever got too smart. I looked around my home. Every memory of the last decade, the birthdays, the anniversaries, the late-night talks, it was all a staged play. Sarah hadn't loved me. She had been working me. "Why tell me this now?" I asked, my mind racing. "If you've already framed me for Marcus's crimes, why show your face?" The ghost smiled. "Because I need one more thing from you, Elias. The final blueprints for the South End Bridge. The ones with the structural adjustments. I asked Marcus to make sure you included." The realization hit me like a physical blow. The minor errors I had caught in the drafts over the last 6 months, the ones I thought were just Marcus being sloppy, they weren't mistakes. They were intentional flaws designed to make the bridge collapse under a specific load. It was a massive insurance fraud and a political assassination plot rolled into one. And because my digital signature was on the files, I would be the one blamed for the tragic accident. "I won't give them to you," I said, my voice gaining a sudden, sharp edge. The ghost chuckled. "Elias, look at the situation. Your wife is going to prison for fraud. Your best friend is going for embezzlement. And you have a choice. You can give me the final drive and disappear with enough money to start a new life under a new name. Or you can join them in a cell for the next 30 years as the man who designed a death trap." He pushed a silver USB drive across the table. It looked like a bullet. For a moment, I felt the weight of my entire life crushing me. I had lost my wife, my friend, and my career in a single afternoon. The temptation to just take the money and run, to let the world burn, because it had burned me, was overwhelming. But then I remembered the smell of the sawdust in my workshop when I built this table. I remembered why I became an engineer, to build things that protect people, not things that kill them. "I'm a structural engineer," I said, standing up. "I don't just build bridges. I know how to find the one point of failure that brings the whole system down." The ghost's smile faded. "Is that a no?" "It's a checkmate," I replied. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It wasn't the one I had been using all night. It was a secondary device, one I had used to record the last 15 minutes of our conversation. "Tahir, you see," I continued, "I knew Sarah was cheating weeks ago, but I also knew Marcus wasn't smart enough to embezzle $400,000 on his own. I've been tracing the money trails for months, long before I went to that research facility. I didn't find your name, but I found the S&M Acquisitions shell company you used. I knew someone was pulling their strings." The ghost reached for his jacket, but I held up a finger. "Tal Hakam, I wouldn't. The police didn't just leave with Sarah and Marcus. The ones outside, they aren't city cops, and they've been listening to every word you just said through the microphones. I installed in this mahogany table 3 days ago. The guards at the door suddenly moved, not to protect the ghost, but to tackle him. The front door burst open again, and this time the uniforms were different. The man who had been sitting so confidently at my table was slammed face down onto the wood, his wine glass shattering and soaking the table in red. Fitting, I thought, for a man who traded in blood. 3 months later, I stood on the balcony of a small apartment overlooking the city. I had sold the Victorian house. I couldn't stand the silence of those rooms, or the way the sunlight still hit the floor where I had seen the loafers. The investigation was the largest in the city's history. Sarah and Marcus, facing decades in prison, had turned on each other within hours of being processed. Their testimonies, combined with my recordings and the ghost's confession, dismantled a criminal empire that had reached into the highest levels of the city's government. The South End Bridge project was halted, the flaws corrected by a new team of engineers. I was cleared of all charges, though my reputation took a hit that would take years to heal. I received a letter from Sarah last week. She begged for forgiveness, claiming she had been forced into the life by the ghost. I didn't finish reading it. I dropped it into the shredder and watched the lies turn into confetti. As I look out at the skyline, I realize that some things are built to be broken. Our lives are often like the structures I design. Sometimes you have to strip everything down to the raw earth before you can build something truly solid. I lost a wife, a friend, and a home. But for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't living in a house of cards. I was standing on my own 2 feet on a foundation of truth. Moral of the story: the most dangerous enemies aren't the ones who scream at you from across the street. They are the ones who whisper, "I love you," while measuring you for a coffin. Trust is a beautiful thing, but blind trust is a weapon you hand to your enemies. When your world starts to crumble, don't try to catch the falling pieces. Use the debris to build a fortress they can never touch. Thank you for joining us for this tale of shadows and structural integrity. If you found Elias's journey as intense as we did, let us know in the comments. Would you have taken the money and run, or stayed to fight for the truth? Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember that even when the foundation breaks, the architect is still in control.